Welcome to the Vitality Equation, exploring research in health and well-being one paper at a time. Today, we're diving into a fascinating and frankly, quite important study about sex disparities in gastric cancer. It's not exactly light listening, but the implications for personalized health are huge.
Absolutely. It's one of those papers that on the surface seems very niche, very specific. But as you dig in, you realize the potential ripple effects for how we approach prevention and treatment are massive. It's about understanding how men and women experience disease differently, down to the molecular level.
Exactly. And for me, what's really exciting is the potential to use this kind of research to develop more targeted lifestyle interventions. We're talking about the interplay of genetics, environment, and personal choices, and how that all comes together to impact our gut health and our risk for something like gastric cancer.
So let's break down the core finding. The study basically highlights that men and women, when diagnosed with gastric cancer, often present with different tumor mutation burdens and distinct gene mutation patterns. What does that really mean?
Okay, so tumor mutation burden, think of it as the total number of mutations within a tumor's DNA. A higher burden often suggests the tumor is more likely to respond to immunotherapy. The fact that men and women show different burdens implies they might respond differently to the same treatments.
And the gene mutation patterns, that's about which specific genes are mutated in the tumor. Certain mutations are linked to different pathways, different drivers of cancer growth. So, if men and women have different patterns, again, it suggests the underlying mechanisms driving their cancers might be different.
Right. So it's not just gastric cancer is gastric cancer. It's gastric cancer in a man versus gastric cancer in a woman. Two different beasts in some ways. And that opens a whole can of worms, doesn't it, about how we should be thinking about personalized medicine?
It completely does. And it's not just about treatment. I immediately start thinking about prevention. If we know there are sex-specific vulnerabilities at the genetic level, can we identify those at risk earlier? And can we then tailor preventative strategies? Not just diet and exercise, but even cognitive behavioral interventions to mitigate those risks.
That's where I get really excited. Because if we know, for example, that certain mutations are more prevalent in men and are linked to, say, a higher inflammatory response, then we can start thinking about anti-inflammatory diets, specific exercise protocols designed to modulate the immune system, and sleep strategies to optimize recovery and reduce inflammation. It's about creating a personalized shield.
Yes. And thinking about the stress response and knowing that men and women often process stress differently, could targeted meditation practices, maybe focused on cultivating resilience, be part of that shield as well? If the mutation patterns are linked to chronic stress, then addressing that root cause becomes crucial.
Absolutely. And that's where CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, comes in. Because stress isn't just a feeling, it's a cognitive process. It's how we interpret events, our thought patterns, our coping mechanisms. If men and women have different cognitive styles that make them more vulnerable to certain stressors, then CBT techniques can help them reframe those thoughts, develop healthier coping strategies, and ultimately reduce their risk.
And it's not just about chronic stress either, but also the physiological response to that stress. Different sexes might have different hormone profiles impacting how their bodies respond, so exercise interventions could be geared toward balancing those hormones and mitigating the negative effects of stress on the gut.
Exactly. It's all interconnected. And the gut, of course, plays a starring role. We know the gut microbiome is heavily influenced by diet, stress, and even sleep. So if these sex-specific mutation patterns are somehow linked to imbalances in the gut microbiota, then personalized dietary interventions become even more crucial. Prebiotics, probiotics, specific food sensitivities, it all needs to be considered.
It's like building a personalized ecosystem within your gut. And the beauty of it is we have so much power to influence that ecosystem. But we need to move beyond the generic eat your vegetables advice and get down to the nitty-gritty of what specific strains of bacteria are beneficial for specific individuals based on their genetic predispositions and lifestyle factors.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about the impact of exercise on the gut microbiome too. We know that exercise can increase the diversity of gut bacteria, which is generally a good thing. But what types of exercise are most beneficial for men versus women? Does resistance training have a different impact than cardio? Do the timing and intensity of workouts matter? These are all questions we need to answer.
It really underscores the need for a truly holistic approach. It's not just about treating the disease once it manifests. It's about creating an environment within the body that is resistant to disease in the first place. And that means addressing the mind, the body, and the gut, all in a personalized way.
And This research also highlights the importance of considering environmental factors. Climate change, for example, is impacting food systems, increasing stress levels, and altering our exposure to toxins. All of these things can impact the gut microbiome and potentially increase the risk of gastric cancer. So, we need to think about nutritional interventions not just in the context of individual health, but also in the context of a changing planet.
Definitely. Climate change is a huge stressor, and it's disproportionately affecting vulnerable populations. So if we know that certain populations are already at higher risk for gastric cancer, and they're also experiencing increased stress due to climate change, then we need to be even more proactive about developing targeted interventions. Things like community gardens, access to healthy food, and stress reduction programs can make a real difference.
That's a great point. It's about creating resilient communities as well as resilient individuals. And that means addressing the social determinants of health, like poverty, food insecurity, and lack of access to healthcare. These are all factors that can exacerbate the impact of genetic predispositions and environmental stressors.
It all comes back to personalized medicine, but on a larger scale. Personalized public health, if you will. We need to understand the unique vulnerabilities of different communities and tailor our interventions accordingly. And that requires a multidisciplinary approach, bringing together researchers, healthcare providers, policymakers, and community members.
Absolutely. And I think this research really underscores the need for more funding for studies that investigate the interplay of genetics, environment, and lifestyle. We need to move beyond the one-size-fits-all approach and start investing in personalized interventions that can make a real difference in people's lives. It's not just about treating disease, it's about preventing it.
Yeah, and thinking about the future, I'm fascinated by the potential of using AI and machine learning to analyze vast amounts of data and identify patterns that we might miss. Imagine being able to predict an individual's risk for gastric cancer based on their genetic profile, lifestyle factors, and gut microbiome composition. That would be a game changer.
Definitely. And I'm also excited about the potential of using technology to deliver personalized interventions. Mobile apps that provide tailored dietary recommendations, guided meditation programs, and exercise plans. Wearable devices that track sleep, stress levels, and physical activity. The possibilities are endless.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that technology is just a tool. The real key is to empower people to take control of their own health, to educate them about the importance of diet, exercise, sleep, and stress management, and to give them the resources they need to make informed choices. It's about creating a culture of wellness.
hmm It's a journey, isn't it? A journey of self-discovery and empowerment. And this research, while focused on a specific disease, really shines a light on the path forward, a path toward a future where healthcare is truly personalized, proactive, and preventative.
So, to summarize, this study shows that gastric cancer presents differently in men and women at the molecular level, highlighting the need for sex-specific approaches to prevention and treatment. It's not just about genes, it's about the complex interplay of genes, environment, lifestyle, and even cognitive processes. We need to move beyond the one-size-fits-all approach and embrace personalized medicine, personalized public health, and personalized interventions that address the unique vulnerabilities of individuals and communities.
And for me, it's about empowering individuals to take control of their own health, to educate them about the importance of diet, exercise, sleep, and stress management, and to give them the tools and resources they need to make informed choices. It's about creating a culture of wellness, one person, one community at a time.
Okay, so let's move on to specific examples. What sort of tailored interventions are we talking about?
Let's say the research showed men with a specific genetic marker also exhibited higher levels of anxiety and a tendency towards negative rumination. A tailored intervention could involve a CBT program specifically designed to address those cognitive patterns. It might include techniques for identifying and challenging negative thoughts, developing relaxation strategies, and improving problem-solving skills. Furthermore, based on meditation practices, it could improve blood flow to regions in the brain to better self-regulate stress.
And on the exercise front, if women with a particular mutation are found to have lower muscle mass and a slower metabolism, a targeted exercise program could focus on resistance training to build muscle and boost metabolism, combined with high-intensity interval training to improve cardiovascular health and insulin sensitivity. Plus, the right sleep schedule to ensure optimal recovery and hormone balance, potentially using light therapy to regulate circadian rhythms.
And from a dietary perspective, if the research shows that men with a certain genetic profile are more susceptible to gut inflammation, then a personalized diet might emphasize anti-inflammatory foods like omega-3 fatty acids, turmeric, and ginger, while limiting processed foods, sugar, and gluten. Perhaps even incorporating fermented foods to support a healthy gut microbiome and, mindfulness practices around eating to reduce stress-related digestive issues.
It's about creating a synergistic effect. The diet supports the gut, the exercise strengthens the body, and the CBT addresses the mind, all working together to create a more resilient individual.
Right. And it's not a static thing either. It's an ongoing process of monitoring, adjusting, and refining the interventions based on the individual's response. Regular check-ins with a healthcare provider, tracking of key biomarkers, and adjustments to the diet, exercise, and CBT plan as needed.
And that's where technology can really help. Wearable devices can track activity levels, sleep patterns, and even stress levels. Mobile apps can provide personalized feedback and support. And AI can analyze all of this data to identify trends and make recommendations.
Absolutely. And the data collected can also be used to refine our understanding of the underlying mechanisms. The more data we have, the better we can understand how genes, environment, and lifestyle interact to influence disease risk. And that knowledge can then be used to develop even more targeted interventions.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that this is just one study. We need more research to confirm these findings and to explore the potential for personalized interventions. But it's a promising start, and it highlights the importance of thinking about health in a more holistic and individualized way.
So, what about the why behind these disparities? What are the potential mechanisms driving these sex-specific differences in gastric cancer?
Well, hormones obviously play a big role. Estrogen, for example, has been shown to have protective effects against certain cancers. Men with lower estrogen levels may be more vulnerable to certain types of mutations or have a less robust immune response. The mental response and stress may also influence the hormonal imbalances to the point of accelerating tumor genesis.
And there are differences in the immune system between men and women. Women generally have a stronger immune response than men, which may help them to fight off cancer cells more effectively. But that stronger immune response can also lead to autoimmune disorders, so it's a double-edged sword.
And lifestyle factors, of course, play a role. Men are more likely to smoke and drink alcohol, which are both risk factors for gastric cancer. They also tend to have different dietary habits than women, often consuming more processed foods and less fruits and vegetables. Stress might lead to bad decisions too.
And there are also differences in how men and women process stress. Men are more likely to suppress their emotions, while women are more likely to ruminate on them. These different coping mechanisms can have different effects on the body, potentially influencing the gut microbiome and the immune system.
Yeah, and there are also differences in body composition. Men tend to have more muscle mass than women, which can affect their metabolism and their ability to process nutrients. And women tend to have more body fat than men, which can affect their hormone levels and their immune response.
So it's a complex interplay of genetics, hormones, the immune system, lifestyle factors, and even cognitive processes. And all of these factors can interact to influence the risk of gastric cancer.
And that's why it's so important to take a personalized approach to prevention and treatment. We need to consider all of these factors when developing interventions, and we need to tailor those interventions to the individual's unique needs and vulnerabilities.
Right, and it's not just about addressing the risk factors. It's also about building resilience. It's about empowering people to take control of their own health and to create an environment within their bodies that is resistant to disease.
Absolutely. And that means addressing the mind, the body, and the gut, all in a personalized way.
Let's talk about practical application. Say someone hears this podcast and is concerned about their gastric cancer risk. What actionable steps can they take right now?
First, talk to your doctor. Get screened for risk factors and discuss your family history. Early detection is key. Then, focus on the fundamentals, a balanced diet rich in fruits and vegetables, regular exercise, and prioritize sleep. Aim for 7-9 hours of quality sleep each night.
And don't underestimate the power of stress management. Incorporate mindfulness practices into your daily routine, even if it's just for a few minutes each day. Meditation, deep breathing exercises, yoga, find what works for you.
And actively work on challenging negative thought patterns. If you find yourself constantly worrying or ruminating, seek out resources on CBT or talk to a therapist. Learning to reframe your thoughts can have a profound impact on your stress levels and overall well-being. And the most important aspect of stress is the lifestyle you have. Mediate on the things you do in your life that you are not in alignment with, and slowly cut those factors out.
And if you smoke or drink alcohol, now's the time to quit or reduce your consumption. These are two of the biggest risk factors for gastric cancer.
And pay attention to your gut health. Eat a variety of fiber-rich foods, consider taking a probiotic, and be mindful of any food sensitivities you might have. Listen to your body.
And finally, stay informed. Keep up with the latest research and talk to your doctor about any new developments that might be relevant to you. Knowledge is power.
These are all general recommendations, of course, but they're a great starting point for anyone who wants to take proactive steps to reduce their gastric cancer risk. And as we learn more about the sex-specific differences in this disease, we can tailor these recommendations even further.
Exactly. It's about empowering yourself with knowledge and taking control of your own health journey.
So, thinking about future research directions, from my perspective, I'm really interested in exploring the link between cognitive processes and cancer development. Can we identify specific cognitive patterns that make people more vulnerable? And can we develop CBT interventions to address those patterns and reduce risk?
For me, it's all about personalized exercise and sleep interventions. I want to see more research on how different types of exercise and sleep patterns affect the gut microbiome, the immune system, and cancer risk. And I want to develop targeted exercise and sleep protocols that can be tailored to the individual's genetic profile and lifestyle factors.
And from my perspective, I'm fascinated by the potential of using AI and machine learning to analyze vast amounts of data and identify patterns that we might miss. I want to see more research on how we can use these tools to predict an individual's risk for gastric cancer and to develop personalized interventions that can make a real difference in their lives. And of course, how mindfulness practices can impact these outcomes. Is it possible to see an improvement in immune markers simply through consistent meditation?
And I think it's important to emphasize the need for interdisciplinary collaboration. We need researchers from different fields, genetics, immunology, nutrition, psychology, exercise physiology, to work together to solve this complex puzzle.
Yeah, and we need to involve the community. We need to listen to the experiences of people who are living with or at risk for gastric cancer. Their insights can be invaluable in developing effective interventions.
Absolutely. It's a collaborative effort. And by working together, we can create a future where gastric cancer is a preventable and treatable disease.
So let's get really granular. If we were designing a research study based on this paper, what specific variables would we want to measure?
Okay, definitely tumor mutation burden and gene mutation patterns, stratified by sex, obviously. We'd need a large cohort to get statistically significant results.
And then we'd want to collect detailed lifestyle data, diet, exercise habits, sleep patterns, stress levels. We could use questionnaires, wearable devices, and even gut microbiome analysis.
And from a cognitive perspective, we'd want to assess things like anxiety levels, rumination tendencies, coping mechanisms, and cognitive biases. We could use standardized psychological assessments and even neuroimaging techniques to measure brain activity.
We'd also want to measure hormonal levels, immune markers, and inflammatory markers. This would give us a more complete picture of the biological mechanisms at play.
And we'd want to follow these individuals over time to see how their lifestyle choices and cognitive patterns affect their risk of developing gastric cancer. A longitudinal study is key.
And we'd want to incorporate a randomized controlled trial to test the effectiveness of different interventions. For example, we could compare a personalized CBT program to a standard stress management program to see which one is more effective at reducing anxiety and rumination.
Or we could compare a personalized exercise program to a standard exercise program to see which one is more effective at improving gut health and immune function.
And we'd want to analyze the data using advanced statistical techniques to identify patterns and relationships between all of these variables. AI and machine learning could be very helpful here.
It would be a massive undertaking, but it would provide invaluable insights into the complex interplay of genes, environment, lifestyle, and cognitive processes in gastric cancer development.
And it would pave the way for more effective, personalized interventions that can improve people's lives.
Exactly. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Using research to make a real difference in the world.
All right, let's bring it back to the climate change angle. We briefly touched on it, but how specifically could climate change impact these sex disparities in gastric cancer?
Well, think about food security. Climate change is disrupting agricultural systems, leading to food shortages and malnutrition. If certain populations are already at higher risk for gastric cancer, and they're now facing increased food insecurity that could exacerbate their risk, especially if they're forced to rely on cheaper, less nutritious foods.
And stress levels. Climate change is creating a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. People are worried about the future, about their livelihoods, about the health of their families. This chronic stress can weaken the immune system and disrupt the gut microbiome, potentially increasing the risk of cancer. It can also push people toward unhealthy coping mechanisms like smoking and drinking.
And exposure to toxins. Climate change is increasing the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events like floods and droughts. These events can release toxins into the environment, contaminating our food and water. And exposure to toxins can damage DNA and increase the risk of cancer.
And access to healthcare. Climate change is straining healthcare systems, making it more difficult for people to access the care they need. This is especially true for vulnerable populations who may already face barriers to healthcare.
So climate change is acting as a threat multiplier, exacerbating existing inequalities and increasing the risk of gastric cancer for vulnerable populations. And we need to address these challenges with targeted interventions that address the root causes of climate change and its impacts on health.
Exactly. We need to build more resilient communities, ensure access to healthy food and clean water, and provide mental health support to those who are struggling with the stress of climate change. And we need to transition to a more sustainable economy that reduces our reliance on fossil fuels and protects our environment.
And we need to empower individuals to take action, to educate themselves about climate change and its impacts on health, and to advocate for policies that protect our planet and our health.
It's a daunting challenge, but it's one that we must face. The health of our planet and the health of our people are inextricably linked. And by working together, we can create a future where both are thriving.
So, final thoughts. What's the one key takeaway you want listeners to remember from this discussion?
For me, it's that personalized interventions are key to preventing and treating gastric cancer. We need to move beyond the one-size-fits-all approach and embrace strategies that address the unique vulnerabilities of individuals and communities.
And I would add that the mind-body connection is crucial. We can't ignore the impact of stress, emotions, and cognitive processes on our health. We need to address the whole person, not just the physical body.
And from my perspective, it's that cognitive restructuring can be a powerful tool for improving mental and physical health. Learning to reframe negative thoughts and develop healthier coping mechanisms can have a profound impact on our well-being.
Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of the Vitality Equation. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into sex disparities in gastric cancer. We hope you found it informative and inspiring.
And remember, knowledge is power. Stay informed, stay proactive, and take control of your own health journey.
Until next time, be well.